Hey everyone, this is Kai from WCC, and today we'll be looking at the Lost Meta Standard tier list. So everyone's calling it the Lost Meta because a lot of our tournaments have gotten cancelled due to the Crush Card virus, and we're not allowed to say the real name of that because apparently YouTube doesn't like that. So yeah, Crush Card virus it is. But yeah, a lot of our Spring Fests have gotten cancelled because of things happening. So we don't really have much data or much idea on what is the current meta at the current time. So through testing and through looking at the Japanese metagame, kind of, the fighters rule, before the fighters rule, because after the fighters rule, stuff happened in Japan as well, which caused a lot of tournaments to be cancelled too. So based on those things, we've got the first Spring Fest would have been coming up this Saturday. So let's think about that and say if my Spring Fest was actually happening this Saturday, what would I bring? These are the decks I would be considering, and I basically just put them out in this nice little table on just between all the clans and their tier list. So higher the tier, the better. And yeah, let's just start going through it. And to no surprise, I think in tier S, we all know it is going to be Narukami. So Narukami basically didn't get hit at all. Well, it did, but it's got a slap on the wrist. It was just, you can only play 2 Chos now, so you can just put 2 of anything else in, and your deck is just still just as good. So a lot of Excel basically got murdered, right, in the previous Fighters rule. The Excel 2 was just so good that they didn't like it how Excel could just be defensive, draw, retire field. They didn't like that, so they just basically nerfed every single Excel 2 clan. Including Narukami, but yeah, Narukami still does the same stuff. It still draws, it still retires, binds your opponent's field. It does lots of multi-attacks, and even does a lot of multi-attacks that your opponent doesn't know how many multi-attacks you're going to do because of just, you bind from hand and you call them out. So it basically does everything that Excel 2 is not supposed to do. They're not supposed to do all that, but they can still do it. So it's actually just very, very strong and very consistent deck. That's why it's just sitting alone in tier S. But moving on into the next tier, we have 2 decks, and that is Mordred and Revan. Now, the new stuff that Mordred got from Dragon's Vanity actually solves 2 of its biggest problems. One being that if you don't ever draw a Blaster Dark, you just feel really, really bad, and your deck does absolutely nothing. And you did get a new grade 3 that will let you search a Blaster Dark. So you're basically running 6 Blaster Darks. So you can kind of always get to a situation where you can do something. And then the other problem with Mordred is that its early game was kind of meh. When we think of old PBD decks, they ran beefy grade 2s that get power, and you can just be aggressive very early and just slam your opponent, lots of damage. But after you transition to Mordred, your lineup is Masquerades at grade 2, it's Blaster Darks at grade 2, and then maybe you're running an Eagle or 2, and that doesn't really put on aggression. So you're basically relying on the main to make very, very weak attacks. And I don't think we ever got the PR in English, so never really got to do big grade 2 plays to push your opponents. So you'll have situations where you're dealing very low damage or very little pressure early on, and you have to use those Blaster Dark restands to kind of make up for the damage, and that was just a bit too slow. But now, those problems are all solved. You have a new grade 2 that allows you, that synergizes with Blaster Darks. It gets 10k power and 10k guard, and now you don't feel bad when you ride a Blaster Dark, because you ride that, you can call that out, and bam, you've got 3 column swing massive, and you don't have to always rely on that in the main. So overall, Mordred got its problems fixed, and then Revan is kind of like Narukami, except without the retire. So one thing that Narukami does really amazingly is just doesn't care about your opponent's triggers. Revan, less so. It still kind of does care. It can hit over kind of maybe 1 trigger, but 2 triggers is a no-no. But it doesn't really have that retire function, but it does have a very, very aggressive attack. So that's why it's still at tier A, goes first. These two decks, when they go first, they're monsters. They're absolutely monsters. And then, yeah, Narukami going first is also an absolute monster. So that's why they're all in tier A. Tier B, we are looking at 3 clans. We've got Agravain for Gold Paladin. We've got God Hand Dragon from Nova Grapplers. And we've got Isabel from Great Nature. Now, these clans all share something very similar in that they have monster high roll capabilities, except Isabelle. Isabelle's the one out. So Agravain, monster high roll capability when it goes first. God Hand, same thing as well. And they could just make huge turns that could just destroy your opponent in just like one turn, and like that's it, right? Isabelle is there just because Great Nature is relatively consistent. It's always been very consistent clan, especially for like an Excel, like as like it was the first Excel clan that was consistent, and then now with Excel 2 and with all its new support, it's gotten really consistent. When it came out though, there were a lot of other clans that were just really, really good. You had Hyuga, you had Pale Moon, you had like Liqueur. Those were really good clans. They basically just outplaced Isabelle, but now that they're kind of not as popular anymore, Isabelle is kind of back in that it's quite playable. But these other two clans, yeah, very high roll clans, similar to like Aquaforce, similar to basically everything above it, except they're more reliant on the high roll. Revan, if it doesn't high roll, okay, it can at least do something. Same thing with Naru. Naru doesn't really need a high roll at all. It just plays normally and you're dead. Same thing with Mordred. But these clans are more reliant on the high roll, so if you don't get your high roll, you just kind of you have a very, very weak game. But it's still a very playable game. And then lastly for Tier C is we have I put in Dimension Police and Eve variants for Bermuda. And then if we want to look at Protect clans that are good, I've put in Dark Irregulars and Mega Colony, Gunning Colio. This Protect stuff is very, very reliant on your current metagame. If your metagame is Narukami's, Revens, and a bunch of these more Excel clans, you probably don't want to play Protects. You probably don't want to play Protect clans at all. But if there's more people gravitating towards Mordred and then other janky forest clans, then sure, yeah, Protect is okay. With these two Protect clans, Dark Irregulars and Gunning Colio, I chose them, and because they're just less affected by playing against Excel. Excel is just your terrible matchup. That's it. But these are decks that still have some kind of options. Well, not options, but a winning game plan going into an Excel matchup. Against a Forest clan, these Protect clans should be absolutely favored. Dark Irregulars, absolutely favored. Gunning Colio just plays really lame and just doesn't care about your opponent. So these two clans are very, very favored going into a Forest matchup. But against Excel, at least it can still have something. Reason why I didn't choose something like Nubatama is that Nubatama is a bit more piece reliant. Going to Excel, you really have to high roll really high, but you just don't have time to do the high roll. So I didn't put Nubatama here. Then we've got Dyliner and Eve. Why did I pick Dyliner and Eve? These two Forest clans can play really, really lame. And what do I mean by lame? So one of the big things against Narukami is that if they go first and they get to their first grade 3 ride, or basically just their first grade 3 ride in general, they want to be able to bind 3 cards and be able to just trigger their 10k and slam you. But if you play really lame by putting nothing in the front row, it makes it a bit harder for them to bind those 3 cards. They're going to need to use like Voltic Shred Dragons or Jaggy Shots to bind from hand to get that bind 3, and that's not always possible. So if you can negate their kind of first grade 3 round and make it very weak, suddenly you have a bit more chance of playing a game. So Dyliner, yeah, if it goes first, slams, like, force 2 Dyliner, right? Slams 3 crit, basically can end the game right there. Your opponent has to guard. Even when it goes second, it can play lame, and it just has to survive 1 turn before it can make a big turn by itself. And then with Eve, Eve variants, I like my Eve Melody. I know some people are playing Eve Carl as well. So Eve variants also have that big one-shot capability, except it happens a bit later. It can play lame early on and then ride Eve, and you're threatening lethal with just 2 damage. Yeah, so those kind of one-shot decks, I put it right at the bottom at C here, simply because, yeah, sure, you know, you have a good win con against Excel clans. Not every Excel clan can draw their null guards early, but there is still some kind of inconsistencies in. With Dyliner, it's that one turn when you want to look at top 7 and always hit a grade 3, so you can do your big Dyliner into Great Dayusha turn to do those multi-attack and just slam your opponent out of existence. If you miss, And even though you run a heavy grade 3 count, if you miss, because it happens, you're basically just losing a game there because your top 7 check was not good enough. And the other thing with Eve is that she is a grade 4, so when you go second, you are slower. And yeah, that's it. You are just slightly slower, and that could just be the difference between winning or losing. So those two things, I put them there because I would consider taking them because they have that oil win capability against some of those Excel clans, but they do have that weakness. So when I look at this, I'd be like, what clans do I want to take? I want to take Narukami for sure. I want to take Mordred probably because it seems like a pretty good deck. And then who wants to play Revan? Remember, like, Revan has that problem where it only runs 4 grade 3s as well. Although it has a grade 3 structure, do I really want to play that? Maybe I want to start picking from the pool below. So that's basically how I would look at this tier list. There is one thing that I did want to test a bit more, and I just didn't have time to test because of what's been going on. It's been pretty hard to get people together, and that is deleters. So I remember way back I posted a deleters list that was basically like a really lame build of deleters, which didn't really focus on finishing your opponent, but more on controlling your opponent's board and threatening lethals with crit and stuff. I do think, I have like, it's like more of a theory at the moment, but because the format is so focused on these single grade 3s, that if you are able to delete your opponent, they're really forced to have to get another copy of itself. Now, if you think about it this way, right? Vanquisher, if it gets deleted, it has to get a Vanquisher or it does nothing. If it rides a Jaggy Shot, that turn is pretty jank. Revan, same thing. It doesn't really have any other grade 3s to ride it as well. So if it doesn't have a Revan, they're done. And these are Excel clans, so they can't rely on force markers on their Vanguard to at least push some damage. Rest of those decks, right? God Hand Dragon. You delete the God Hand Dragon, they have to have another one, or there's no finishing turn next turn. Agravain, same thing. Gotta get the Agravain or they're done. So overall, I think deleters do have a pretty decent... They theoretically have a good place in the metagame, so I do want to test that a bit more when I get the chance. And I think I'll probably sit somewhere in like C, like a nice little control deck. So yeah, that's what I want to test a bit more on. But overall, I think if you're going to a Springfest, or if you were going to a Springfest, you are definitely taking Narukami, and then you will likely take a Revon or a Mordred, and then something else. So that's it for me for this time. It looks like the stuff that's going on around the world, that is going to happen. That's going to, keep on going on for a very long time. We might even extend to the next set as well, Astral Force. I know in Japan they've had like not many Astral Force tournaments at all, so that might become another lost meta. But interestingly enough, our Springfest was supposed to be in the Astral Force meta, so we've been testing that a bit. And since our Springfest got suspended, maybe we'll release another standard tier list video later on, after we've done more testing, especially with the deleters. I really like the deleter idea. I feel like, going against Chronofangs, even with deleters, you might be onto something. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. This is the current tier list for me. Play Narukami, play Mordred, and play something else. So see you guys in the next video. Stay safe, guys, and don't, I guess, play video games. It's always a good thing. Internet and video games are all you need. All right, and watch YouTube videos. Bye.